Her skin was warm and soft, like a mug of hot chocolate, with just a hint of milk. Another hint. We're just gonna start with the milk, and there we go. Her skin was warm and soft, like what to the untrained eye might look like a glass of milk, but was in fact hot chocolate. A disappointing glass of hot chocolate. This was originally supposed to be a video on writing characters of color as a whole, but it got away from me. So now it's a video on how to describe your characters. Seriously, I made it to tip 1 in a tip and tricks video and just kept going on and on. So now you get a video on how to describe your characters with heavy emphasis on describing and writing characters of color. So let's talk about character descriptions. Hey! I interrupt this video to tell you about my book, Phantoms of the Inferno, a high fantasy story with elemental magic systems, evil kings, espionage, and mass extinction events galore. If that sounds interesting, you should read Phantoms of the Inferno on Scribblehub and Wattpad. I put up a new chapter every Sunday and have the links down in the descriptions. Now, back to the video. I wouldn't say writing descriptions is hard so much as tricky. And that's because the right and wrong way to write a description is largely based on the story you're telling. If you're writing a story where you want the reader to be able to project themselves onto the character, you may want to limit how much you described. But if you're writing a story with a big cast of characters, you want more descriptions to help the reader keep track of everyone. And if a certain feature of a character plays a role in the plot, you want to describe that feature early on, not just when it becomes relevant to the plot. But you want to be careful not to add too much description either. If you have 5 paragraphs describing one character, that will bring your story to a screeching halt and break immersion. Instead, you might want to make your initial description short and sweet. I'm talking a short paragraph and sprinkle in more details throughout the story as they become relevant. But most important is, and say it with me kids, keep it consistent.
Consistency!
The reason I got here from my writing characters of color research is because something that kept coming up over and over is that characters of color often aren't given the same level of attention as white characters. Usually it's just the black man, and that's it. Well, you know where every freckle on the white character's face is, and that's a bad start to writing characters of color. And an easy way to avoid it is by making a list of features for each character and what they look like. I'm talking eye color, hair color, style, length, height, age, weight, facial shape, other memorable features. Think scars, tattoos, piercings. Then you grab 3 or 4 features from the list. Make sure to mix them up and not describe the same features over and over again, and use that to write the descriptions in your story. That way each character is still memorable and they all get a fairly even amount of description. So now I'll go over my list and how you should tackle each feature on it. What type of body does your character have? Do they have broad shoulders? Are they skinny, fat? Do they have lithe, long limbs, or are they more stubby? Are they a string bean who needs help opening a jar, or are they a bodybuilder or warrior? And those are important differences. Bodybuilders are what we typically think of when we think of muscular people, with very large bulging muscles, a six-pack, veiny abs, and... The term veiny abs just activated my asexuality. Moving on, because I'm suddenly uncomfortable. A warrior will not look like a bodybuilder. They want fat. It's great padding, and bodybuilders dedicate a lot of time to accentuating muscles that look nice but don't add much to actual physical strength. And it is very hard to upkeep long term. If you don't dedicate time and energy to maintaining a six-pack, it will fade fast. And that's worth noting when you're describing a character. If your character starts the story with a six-pack, it could be a good indication of what in their life has or hasn't changed, what priorities have and haven't shifted, depending on if they have a six-pack at the end or not. But you do want to be careful, boys, when you're describing certain other body features. You can and maybe should describe what a girl's boobs look like, but don't go on and on about them. You get 1 sentence max. Any more is bad writing, and you should be aware that boobs cause a lot of problems. The bigger they are, the more they'll hurt your back, making it harder to twist, bend, and lift, limitations that could affect how your characters interact with the world. And even if they're not very big, they get in the way of seatbelts, they catch crumbs, or if you're wearing the wrong type of shirt, they'll become a black hole for crumbs. Bras hurt after a few hours, boobs hurt depending on the time of the month, and if you need to reach into that tight space to grab the thing and are so close but can't quite reach, It could be your boobs making it unreachable. They're really great limiters for your characters, making it harder for them to do things. Don't write about how they bounce, write about how they hurt. Now we're getting into writing characters of color. Don't describe your Asian characters as having almond eyes, and don't give your black characters green eyes. And beware that blue eyes are dominant. You won't have them unless at least one of your parents, maybe a grandparent, because genetics are weird, has blue eyes.
Those eyes.
Alright, the almond eye thing. Asia is a continent. Over half of all people live in Asia, so they obviously don't all have the stereotypical Chinese eyes. And side note, for the love of God, do not be like Stephen King in The Stand and describe any character as having Chinese eyes. I loved Leo. I did not love that descriptor. If you're writing Asian characters, use other eye shapes to describe their eyes, or don't describe the shape of their eyes at all. Describe the color, or how long their lashes are, or what their eyebrows look like. I understand the appeal because my story takes place in a fantasy world. Asia doesn't exist, so I couldn't say any character was Asian, so I put a lot of time and effort into describing my Asian characters using other descriptors and making note of why they had those features to hopefully get across that they're Asian coded.
Straight to Asia!
And as for the black characters with green eyes, don't give your black characters blue or green eyes because you are stepping into a rabbit hole littered with minefields. People give their black characters green eyes to help them stick out and seem more exotic. But it's a slippery slope from exotic to fetishized and playing into tropes like the noble savage and magical Negro trope. If you want to make your black character stick out, you shouldn't use a fast and easy trick like blue eyes. You should put in that extra effort to give them a strong, unique personality and make them a character that can stick out for who they are. And you also have to remember that green and especially blue eyes are incredibly rare, which makes it ironic how much authors love them. And I get it, there are a million descriptors for blue eyes, and it's hard to find that love for brown or black or hazel eyes. But if you give every major character blue eyes, suddenly they're not special or noteworthy. Instead, you should put in the work to give darker eyes colors more love, and that will help your writing be more memorable rather than having 50 characters using the same tired description for their blue eyes that every author has already used. And you should also listen to the Eye Color Ballad. It's a fun song. You don't need to know the exact age of your characters, but you should know what decade of their life they're in. The age of your characters will say a lot about them. The older people get, the more gray hairs they have, more wrinkles, more saggy skin, more existential dread. And their personalities and dramas and how they react to the drama will also change. The drama you have in your teens is very different from the drama you have in your 20s or 30s. You want to be mindful if you're giving a 30-something teenage drama and having them react to it in a teenage way, because that's a big sign of immaturity. And while that can be an interesting flaw to give your characters, you want it to be a deliberate flaw. This is another one that you want to be aware of when it comes to characters of color. I use hair as a shorthand in my fantasy book to help emphasize which of my characters are black, and that involves a lot of research because black people have hair that is so different from mine. It dries out differently, curls differently, requires different brushes, shampoos, conditioners, pillowcases. It is a rabbit hole that I had a lot of fun exploring, and even if you don't have any black characters in your story, or they just wear box braids for the whole story, you want to be aware of different hair colors, textures, and thicknesses. If you describe a character with very thin hair, you probably can't have them putting it up in elaborate updos. If you have a character with curls, it will behave very differently than straight hair, and long hair requires a lot more attention and thought than short hair. Believe me, I grew up with long hair, and I don't miss it. And then there's beards and mustaches. Which characters have them? Do they take good care of them, or do they have food in their ratty beards? And which characters can only grow patchy facial hair?
My beard. I broke my beard.
And you also want to be aware of symbolism. If you want to write a redhead just for the sake of having a redhead, you can. But you could also have a redhead because red hair often symbolizes passion and a hot temper. You can have a redhead who leans into that or subverts the expectation. Blondes are often seen as more carefree and youthful. Brunettes are more bookish. People with black hair are more serious. And there's a whole rabbit hole you can go down for basically every color of the rainbow when it comes to different hair colors. You just have to decide if the hair color is natural or if it's dyed, and why, and if you want to lean into symbolism or not. More descriptors when it comes to writing characters of color. Don't describe them as having chocolate skin. Unless they are white, do not describe their skin using food for comparison. That has been done to death, and it is fetishizing and offensive. There are so many other ways to describe your character's skin color, and you should describe it, especially if they're white. If you describe every character of color's skin color, but not the white characters, then you're implying a default, and that the default is white. When I'm describing a character's skin tone, I always ask myself what frame the descriptor is coming from and what's important to the person who's describing the character. When I have a character who has plant magic describe skin tone, they use flowers and trees and other plants to describe skin tone. When I have a character who has animal magic describing the skin tone, they use animals. When I have a character who likes jewelry, they use gemstones. It helps tell us about the character doing the describing and the character being described. I'm a short person. I'm 5 feet tall, and it is awful. It's so annoying constantly having to ask a tall person to help me read something, climbing stuff I shouldn't, or tracking down a step stool. But that's also good drama for your story. It can help drive the plot along to have characters who can't do certain things because they're either too big or too small. And it can also say a lot about your characters. Who's your gentle giant or your little gremlin? Who's tall and constantly bumping their head on door frames? Who's short and filled with rage? Because all people are filled with rage. Who's insecure about their height? How does their height influence their fashion? Like what shoes they wear or how much trouble they have finding pants that are the right length? Who makes fun of them for their height? This is all a great way to get to know your characters and how they interact with each other. I talked in my writing disabilities videos about how disfigurements are great ways to make a character memorable. Giving them unique features will help them stand out, but it's a tricky balancing act. It's very easy to write a character with a disability or disfigurement and get it wrong. You want to make sure you're writing a whole person, not just one feature. And you want to be aware of how they got their scars or disfigurements. Were they born disfigured, or did they acquire it later in life? In either case, how do they feel about it? Are they proud of their scar, or is it a constant reminder of their tragic backstory? Or do those questions even get brought up? You can have other characters notice scars and disfigurements, but they never need to ask about them. And sometimes that is the way to go. Sometimes it doesn't matter why a character has a scar on their shoulder any more than it matters that they have black hair. And if they did acquire the scar and disfigurement later on, are they only skin deep? Disfigured and disabled aren't interchangeable, but they are terms that can very much go hand in hand, or hand in hook if that's what your character looks like. But if it's more than skin deep, that's a lot more work, and you should start by watching my video on writing disabilities. I debated putting tattoos in the scars and disfigurement category because they have the similarity in that tattoos, unlike piercings or fashion, are permanent. But unlike scars, there's something you choose, and how your character chooses to decorate their body can say a lot about them. It can say a lot about their culture and where they come from. I have some characters who have extensive tattoos that are very important to their culture, but I also have other characters who just think tattoos are cool. I also have characters with all sorts of body modifications, some as simple as ear piercings or as extensive as magical body modifications, and that's something you want to ask when you're shaping your magic system. If the magic can add body modifications, how is that? How are the modifications viewed, and who has them and why? This all says a lot about your world and your individual characters, whether they have body modifications or if they judge others for having them. And fashion also says a lot about your world and characters. If you're writing a story that takes place in the past, you probably won't have your characters running around in white. It simply wasn't practical or possible for most of history for people to ever wear white. And you want to do a lot of research on fashion through the ages. And even if your story takes place in modern times or a different world, fashion says a lot about your characters. How do they wear their hair? Do they like accessories? And if so, is it because the accessories are useful or frivolous? Do your girls prefer skirts or pants? Is it socially acceptable for men to wear skirts? Who likes to dress modestly and who doesn't? Who has to dress a certain way for religious or cultural beliefs? How does weather affect how they dress? And how does one facet lean into another? Answering all these questions will help you understand your characters and the world they live in so much better.
Is that what you're wearing?
And that's all the features on my list, but you can add or take away any features you want when you're making your own character Bible. Just remember to be mindful of what descriptions is needed for your story, who doesn't need a description, and are you being fair to all your major characters without letting the descriptions get in the way of the story. And if you're still struggling, a good way to find inspiration is to look up common ways different features are described, or to look at pictures of people and use them as inspiration. And if you're writing characters of color, a great resource is Writing with Color on Tumblr, which I'll link in the description. I know, Tumblr, but it's actually a great blog with a lot of helpful resources. And in the meantime, don't forget to read and write. Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, like, subscribe, ring that bell, eggs, butter. I will get a better system for this. I just need to find my to-do list.